Hi, I'm Simon from TestBuddy. TestBuddy is a tool for exploratory testers to help them capture notes and share helpful test reports. If you'd like to learn more, please get in touch. My details are in the video description. Welcome to today's episode of Conversations on Exploratory Testing. And today's chat is with the brilliant Dan Billing. Dan is a software test quality and security professional of 20 years. He's a big part of the testing community and helps many testers by running workshops, speaking at events, and blogging. In today's conversation, we discuss the relationship between exploratory testing and application security, how heuristics can help focus your security testing efforts, and we explore the many ways to get into security testing whilst having awareness of the security testing rabbit hole. I wanted to get your thoughts on security testing and that concept of how you prioritize a security focus when you are developing applications.
Let's take, for example, any architecture that you care to put together, a user interface with an API, with a database on the back end, and maybe a couple of interfaces to some other third-party environment or whatever it might be. You're going to have data that's talking to each other. And that data needs to talk to each other in a performant way, in a usable way, and in an accessible way, but also in a secure way. And sometimes those priorities just don't mesh up, and they don't gel in people's heads.
Yeah.
As to what is more important, and some people put those things like performance and usability and accessibility to the back of their minds. And security is sadly one of those things, because not every team has a security specialist in it. Not every company has security specialists. They might be very high level and focused on things like infrastructure and networking. They might not necessarily be focused on application security, which is a different layer of complexity down as well. So, and when you're talking to people about security, sometimes I've seen people either glaze over or lose interest at a business level. And that might be down to me or my approach, I don't know. Or it might be that they just are so focused on their individual or their targets and their goals that they don't see that there are potential risks there. So one of the things that I like to think about first is, what are the risks if we do or don't do this thing?
Yeah.
And that's how I initially got into security testing, really, and how I started plugging it into my day-to-day exploratory and broader testing approaches, because I saw a functional spec or something like that, and there was no mention, and it was supposed to be a secure application because it was being delivered to the police.
I
so
see.
therefore,
Yeah.
it was handling personal information of not only the for fixed penalty notices. So if you ever got a parking or actually mostly speeding fines. So it was managing speeding fines and driving offences and things like that. So fixed penalty notices. So you're dealing with offender information, you're dealing with vehicle information, you're dealing with camera data, and you're dealing with police information. So the officer who might have booked the driver, for example, that's all data that needs to be protected. And I was always told it's someone else's job, don't worry about it. But there was nothing in the spec that told me how we were supposed to secure this application.
I can
Nothing
imagine.
at all.
Sorry to interrupt.
Very frustrating.
I can imagine. Yeah, absolutely. That frustration where you probably the most you could get, and I've seen this before, where a requirement will say just like a few lines at the end, or it'd say it must be secure, it must be performant. You're like, oh, what does that really mean? Like, kind of give us a bit more. And that's probably where exploratory testing can come in and really amplify it, because you're then saying, well, okay, well, let's explore some security risks. What might they be? And then actually use that as a trigger point. So while I absolutely agree that it is frustrating that up front we sometimes, and a lot of the time, don't have this stuff specced out, but I don't think it stops us from then running an exploratory session or two just to get started, to sort of reveal some information and go, you know what, we should think about this stuff more, because I've looked at this system diagram, I've read this spec, I've run this session to reveal information that is related to perhaps these two common security vulnerabilities, and this is what I think would happen because we've not made stuff a little bit more explicit about how we should handle these particular scenarios.
Having it explicitly in documents and things like that, it then would prompt the organization to actually invest in the people and the resources to actually test and fix this stuff. And being told that your software isn't secure isn't something you want to hear. And it's very sensitive. It's kind of the testing that dare not speak its name. If you're allowing me to misquote Oscar Wilde, because a lot of companies don't disclose their security behaviors and their security activities because it's so sensitive, because it can lead to reputational damage. So they often either ignore it or sweep it under the carpet, or they are super proactive about it. And finding companies that are really super proactive about security is a real challenge. When I first started getting into exploratory testing was about the same time that I was starting to get into security as well. So you're talking about 2007 or 8, and I first started hearing about things like session-based testing management and exploratory testing techniques, and hearing about things like rapid software testing. So that increase of awareness of these different quality aspects has led to an exponential growth of skills, but at the same time, some problems that have arisen as because of that. So because I start spotting these things, my frustration at them not being approached and fixed or addressed or even talked about started to cause me some challenges in terms of my communication approach. So at the same time, you then have to be able to marry that technical challenge, that technical learning, with your more thoughtful, pastoral, human-centered approach to dealing with problem solving. And it really sort of started to come into its own when I was given the opportunity to focus on it deeply as part of a project I was working on. Right. So, and become a leader in that organization. And it wasn't until then, I want to say about 2013, 14, that I really started accelerating that learning, because I felt supported and valued. So building testing charters that were security focused, sharing them and having them peer reviewed and talked about with colleagues, and them actually caring about the problem. Because we knew that the application that I was working on at the time had a lot of holes, and because of some of the clients that we were interacting with and working with, they needed to know that the data was secure, or at least had met compliance and regulations, so that they could utilize our applications in their environment. So that became sort of the necessity, really. So the human growth of that skill, as well as the technical development. And the exploratory testing approaches really helped me to get a grip on what was important and how to share this information and make it palatable and not go in like a bull in a china shop.
So to your point of finding support from others on that journey into security testing, it sounds like that was a turning point, plus the power of using exploratory testing techniques to allow you to articulate what it is you discovered.
Yeah.
And
hugely important.
And how did it, when you went through that experience, did it just take time? Was it about repetition and like slowly, or was there a real light bulb moment for some of your key stakeholders?
Bit of both, really. I did have to do a lot of repetitive actions, setting up tooling, running the same test over and over again, building some scripts to help me do that. Also, there was we had to do PCI compliance, so payment card industry compliance, and that was monthly. So some of this stuff I ended up having to do monthly. And because I was the security focused person, I ended up mostly doing that with help.
Yeah.
And that became more of a chore than anything enjoyable and exploratory. So trying to automate some of that was really important, like using the scanning tools and things like that. And, I found some quite nasty problems alongside a colleague of mine. The log file for the application that I was testing, it basically was recording what number you put in. So if you pressed your credit card number, it would have a .wav file, a sound file, for each of the numbers that you put in, because it needed to, when you pressed it, just put it in the log file. So when we looked at the log files, we saw it was recording all the credit card numbers.
Wow.
But then you could also tell, once we obfuscated the file name, you could also tell from the length of the file what numbers were put in. So the end, we had to do a load of work to obfuscate the log file so it didn't capture people's credit card numbers and all that kind of thing.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, I personally didn't locate that bug. It was a colleague of mine that found that, but testing that and working on it was it was really difficult challenge.
Yeah.
I found some others where we could manipulate the REST requests so that I could add any user at any level in the hierarchy of users in their permission levels. So I could escalate privilege for a basic user up to a super user. So someone that just had login access so that they could use the application, through to someone that could do full admin rights over the whole application, not just their little bit of it.
Yeah.
And because it was a shared domain, so that all the users were on the same domain, you could escalate privilege across user databases as well. So it had multiple customers on the same domain. So there was not only vertical privilege access, but there was horizontal privilege access as well. So you could get access to other customers' data as well as escalating data up and down. It was incredible.
Yeah, wow. And good on you and your colleagues for finding that and exploring that and exposing those vulnerabilities. I'm sure the company at the time was
you can't easily find those things with a scanning tool. There's things like Z-Attack Proxy and Burp Suite might highlight that. And those two tools are useful to give you a broad, and then once you've identified, you can then use some of the tooling to help you manipulate individual requests and responses at a discrete level.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of layers to this. And it does require human interaction. You can't rely on scanners to pick up everything, because they'll throw up so many false positives. It's very hard to really pick out the really important aspects, really important issues from any scanning tool output. It requires a human being to do this stuff. People are saying that AI is going to possibly automate some of that out of the way, and that's always possible. But a human will always react faster, be more intuitive. And this is the thing with security. You're not just going up against applications and how good or bad they are from a security perspective. You're going up against criminals who want to steal your data and sell it or use it against you, or industrial espionage, or even nation state attacks and things like that. There's various podcasts and other sources of information for these kinds of security challenges. Darknet Diaries, and I have a sticker from Darknet Diaries here.
Oh, very nice.
It's one of the best podcasts out there on any topic. There's a guy called Jack Crusader talks about these security challenges, and a lot of these people that do security work or either legitimately on the grey hat environment, or they're black hat hackers. All they're doing is experimentation, trying to find a way through a problem and then solving it using repetition, exploration, and some automation. And then using a whole set of human skills to help them do that. And security professionals in organizations and so on that want to protect data, as I said, aren't just going up against technology, they're going up against human beings that are utilizing and undermining technology. So if we don't understand those vulnerabilities, those potential risks, then we're opening up our organizations that we work for to a whole heap of problems, both reputational as well as financial and technological. And then there's the social challenge of things like this. So, there's a whole heap of different levels of security that you can consider. And I think that the exploratory testing world, the universe that we operate in as testers in modern testing, we have a huge opportunity to grow into that space. And for some people, it's quite daunting. And they might just pick out little bits of things that they can work on. So, okay, so I'm building a new API or I'm building a new user interface, and I can do things like some injection of some malicious characters into this field or form or into this request. And that's a great place to start. Small steps. So, and then that can lead on to either growth into a full-blown penetration testing career if you want to take it that way. I haven't, but you can do that if you want. And the opportunities are there. And I think that as long as we embrace those and we're diverse in the way we do it, I've always said that the more diverse your organizations, the more problems and issues you're going to uncover, because you've got a different breadth of thinking and opportunities for learning and discovery. Because not everybody thinks the same way. Some people think very logically, and some people don't. Some people think, what happens if I do this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that kind of concept of kind of small steps, if someone wants to make that, and not even a jump into the world of security testing, but a step into that world, where I think there's things that we can rely on as exploratory testers, like heuristics. So when you were describing about that privilege issue earlier on, I think a classic set of heuristics you can use is all around privileges. Like, do I have permission for this? Am I a super user, admin, or regular, or whatever? And just like those as a go-to starting point to allow us to come up with test ideas. And do you find, because I think when I'm running an exploratory testing session, of course, it's important to understand what it is, information I'd like to achieve at the end of, say, I don't know, a 45-minute session. But there are some heuristics that for some reason, I always fall back on. So CRUD is one of my favorites as an exploratory tester. Create, read, update, delete. So my classic go-to. And I wonder, in the world of security testing, are there some real go-to heuristics that you can kind of get hold of and apply, at least to kind of get you into that world?
There are, yeah. So looking at what error handling is in a system is a good place to start.
Yes, I see.
So when you're doing a create, what is the response you're getting back from the system? Is it exposing information while you're doing that? So can you look at not just error handling, any information handling, any data handling in the request? So when you create, what's it creating? Can you see in the log what's it's exposing when you're doing that? And is that visible via the browser? Or if you make a mistake while you're doing that, so when you're creating a new record, if you inject, say, a quote mark into the value for, say, a username, it might not expose anything to the user interface, because the user interface might filter that out, but the API that's making that call to the database might actually throw an error. What's that error throwing? Have a look in there. It's the same with the read and the update and the delete as well. If your delete is open to everything, you don't want that. you don't want the delete to be open to anyone, because then you've got the opportunity to undermine and perform a denial of service. So the CRUD heuristics are a great place to start. I always look at that. There's a threat model by a chap called Adam Shostak, or at least I think he incepted it. I've got his book here, actually. It's worth checking out. Threat modeling, designing for security. Adam Shostak.
Brilliant.
Okay. It's called the STRIDE model. So it's spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, and elevation and privilege. So the one that I was talking about just then was information disclosure. So when you're examining how an application is behaving, either through the front end or the back end or the API or the database or whatever it might be, is it providing you with information about how the application is performing? What information is it providing you? And is any of that information open to the world? Let's say, for example, if you've got a file upload thing, upload an image, for example, can you upload anything alongside that? So could you take a malicious file and make it a .jpeg, for example? And how does it respond to that? One of the best places for sources of heuristics you can go to for security, though, are the things like the OWASP top 10.
Yes.
And the CVE, which is a library of existing vulnerabilities that are known. So there's the OWASP top 10, which covers the 10 major vulnerabilities. It's been updated, I think, in 2017. So it's worth revisiting it. It covers all the major vulnerabilities, such as injection and cross-site scripting and things like that. But those in themselves, they are oracles of information, stuff that we can use for learning. They aren't necessarily heuristics. They aren't necessarily useful in that way. They might give us an idea of where to go next, the kinds of vulnerabilities we might want to test for, but they aren't necessarily going to say, this is what you need to do or how you might try and exploit it. So that requires some tooling to help you to do that. So things like fuzzing, for example, is very good because it will give you a very rapid feedback on whether you've got potential injection vulnerabilities in your code. And it's very simple to implement on most user interfaces and most APIs. That's if you're talking about web applications. And then you can fuzz over the code base as well. So it's the stuff that you can do very early on when the code is being built, and later on once the application is in an environment that you can test on easily. So, but you know, one of the great things for security for me would be things like password reset and recovery solutions. So where people aren't using their single sign-on that they've bought in using like Google single sign-on or Microsoft single sign-on, a lot of people, or have done in the past, crafted their own login procedures, and that is a recipe for disaster because people will craft in things that, you know, basically they're using potentially vulnerable libraries and things like that. There's a up and down to this. So, you know, if you're using a single sign-on solution that's been bought in from elsewhere, then that's only one place that the attacker knows they need to attack. But if it's a reliable, well-known single sign-on feature, then it's less likely it's going to, unless it's implemented incorrectly, it's less likely to be a vulnerability or a potential vulnerability for you. You've mitigated the risk by shifting it to someone else's responsibility. So if you're using someone else's single sign-on and you're not crafting it yourself, then, you know, if I'm looking for things like, you know, how easy is this going to be to get into and stuff like that, that's the kind of thing that I would look for first. Is it bespoke? Is it using old libraries of JavaScript, or is it using a public API of some kind or something like that. So these are all things that I look for when I'm testing.
Yeah, I see.
Or when I have done it in the past. It's been a while since I've done it. But and if I were a cryptography expert, which I'm not, if I'm looking at a log file and I can see a string and it looks like it's returning your username and password, but that username and password is encrypted somehow, it's not what I typed in, then I could perhaps decrypt that using whatever algorithm that I can decide on. If it's something that I recognize, so things like one of the SHA ones, like SHA-5 or whatever it might be, you don't want to use one of those. You want to use one of the more complex encryption algorithms. And those easier ones, those older ones, are much easier to spot and decrypt. So heuristics is a difficult one because there is a lot out there, but it's so much to keep in your head all at once. And I like to be able to break it down. This is where I get onto some of the mental health problems when it comes to security that I have, because when I'm testing now, when I'm doing exploratory testing, I can't help but look for security problems above and beyond any other problem that might be present. So it blinds me to things like usability, accessibility, and functionality, the overall functionality of what you're trying to deliver. My go-to is always to look for security problems when I'm looking at something. And that is a problem for me. And it has been a problem for me in the past. And when you're coming to build a broader strategy for testing, you can't think that way. You have to think about all the levels and areas of testing. So if you want to go down the rabbit hole, you can. But remember, if the further you go down the rabbit hole, the harder it is to come back out. And that's a danger if you let yourself. If you want to, you can do that. And that's why it's such a specialized area of quality and testing and technology, because it's so deep and so broad. So it's very hard to keep yourself in a focused mindset where you allow yourself to just test what's important to you and prioritize the things that are important. So if you're building a new feature or function, just keep that feature or function in your mind while you're testing it, and what the user experience is. Why are you doing that security testing? Well, because you want to protect the user's data. Why are you doing that security testing? Well, you want to give them a really good user experience when they log in. They're not worried that their data is going to be lost or deleted or stolen. There's a whole heap of reasons why there's two right there. But the more you go down the security rabbit hole, it is quite a tough one to climb out of. But if you want to deep dive on it, then there's a whole heap of places you can go to learn. And I recommend those if you want to do it. But remember, it's a huge technical and personal challenge if you're going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice that around, and thank you for being so open about those challenges. Great advice around being aware of our own biases and understandably so. And it takes real strength to step back from it and go, thinking in terms of running an exploratory testing session, it's like this 45 minutes is just about usability. That's all I need to focus on. I'm going to try my hardest not to, if I pick up on something else, maybe I note it and mark it that it's off chart, or I can come back to it later. But I know for that 45 minutes, this usability has got my attention. And that's hard, particularly when we spot something like, I've just seen this and I really want to go and explore this some more, but I just going to stop myself. And that's where I find short, sharp time box sessions are really powerful, because you can gather a good amount of information in 45 minutes, for example, and then debrief with someone, and then okay. And I also found this issue that I didn't dig into, but I'm going to create another charter for it. How about I run that charter? And they're like, yeah, cool. And you can go again and you can reveal that useful information and kind of give yourself a bit of a break and not overwhelm yourself as a tester with too much information, and also not overwhelm our audience when we debrief them with that information that we've discovered.
Is that what they need to hear? And is it relevant to what you're trying to build at that point? So if you're going deep diving on security problems, but they haven't even considered that that's a issue for them, then perhaps rather than giving them a deep dive on a security issue that you might have found, yes, go ahead and raise your bug, but actually suggest perhaps we should do some threat modeling around this to see where the potential risks could be, rather than going in like a bull in a china shop. And I like your thinking about focus time on, I mean, chartering is so important for me as a tester because it keeps me on that path that I need to worry about in that moment. Where am I in the here and now, rather than what am I going to do in tomorrow or the next day, or what did I do yesterday? What's the important focus right now? And it's sometimes that can be lost if you aren't keeping to a charter and you're not being strict with yourself, but at the same time being mindful that you will find other issues as you're going along, and giving, like you said, giving yourself permission. When you're on any journey, you'll find interesting things to look at.
Absolutely.
I'm reminding myself of my trip down through the North Island of New Zealand, and I'm driving from Auckland back down to Wellington, and there's so much cool stuff to look at, and I can't see it all because I've only got a few days to do it in. So I target the areas that I'm interested in. I visit friends in Tauranga, and then I go to Rotorua and stay there for a day or two, and then I go and visit the Polynesian spa for my birthday. And I can't go and see everything in only 5 days. You really have to constrain yourself, and beating yourself up over not being able to go full in is really quite hard work. And it's something that I've done, and it's my own vulnerabilities. So discovering vulnerabilities in myself. I think there's a talk in this somewhere about, there's a great thread on the club, Ministry of Testing Club at the moment, on tunnel vision in testing, and controlling your biases. And I found that when I was doing that it was very hard for me to break out of that mindset.
Yeah.
So in my current role, I don't have the time to go deep dive on security issues. Mine is quite a high level strategic role at the moment. So I'm working on planning testing across an entire project, of which security is a part, but not the main part. So I have to be very mindful that whilst it's obvious that when I write the security section of this strategy, that I'm coming in there with a lot of prior knowledge and some biases.
Yeah.
But I also need to know that I need to lift up the other aspects of quality as well and champion those too, like the accessibility challenges, for example. And that's a hot topic at the moment as well. And usability is a hot topic for us as well. So, there's a lot of challenges, of which security is one. And I find, okay, so you're doing this on the TestBuddy channel, but tools like TestBuddy help you with that, because you can capture those things as you go along, and trying to find the right tool that suits you and allows you to make those decisions as you flow through the test are very important. That they allow you to maybe take the occasional tangent, but then you can quickly and easily get back to your intended target and your intended test. You might spot a problem while you're doing a test, but it turns out that whilst it looks like a problem, it really isn't. So it's basically, you need to tune out the signal to noise ratio. So the log files and the responses from all the tooling tells you that there might be a problem, but your knowledge of the application tells you that actually that we don't use that technology, or that isn't a problem with us because of X, Y, and Z. or we've got an old library there and we haven't deprecated it yet, and that's why that's still flagging. So, you can tune out those things in your testing so that they don't become a red flag to you every time you do it. And that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. I find that using the tools to their best ability is the best way of getting the most out of my security testing. So if I'm testing a UI, I might have tools like Bug Magnet handy. I'd lay out all my tools on the table ready to go. If I was doing some painting and decorating, I would do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
I have all the equipment out ready and know that I can pick and choose the one that I need for the appropriate job. And that it's got the right information, it will generate the right kind of information or feedback that I need to get the answers that I need for that particular charter. And for me, whilst security is the most technically challenging testing I've done, apart from some stuff I've been doing recently around containers and stuff like that, and radio networks, it's also some of the most mentally challenging testing I've done. Simply because of the intellectual hoops you have to go through to try and understand whether something is a problem or not. And also then, not only that, the challenge of communicating that testing so it's of value to somebody. Yeah. And we're coming back to then what is the value of what you're doing versus what is valuable to you as an individual. And that for me is also a big challenge. I wanted to deep dive on the security stuff because I knew that I could basically have a job for life if I wanted to, because security testing is quite niche and it's well paid. But that comes at a price, because there's a whole heap of courses you can go on which are expensive. There's also it's a very cliquey environment as well. So if you haven't done X course or Y course, or if you haven't done computer science at university, and I didn't do computer science at uni, or if you use this particular language or not, or you've worked in this technology or not, the security community, it can be quite insular, and diversifying that is very important. And a lot of people in the testing community have done a lot of work on diversifying the community, and that's great. But the security community, as a subset of the tech community, have a lot more work to do. It's mostly men that you see talking about it and doing it in the public domain. But now there are more and more women and people of color doing this kind of work as well. That is more visible. So Jay Harris, for example, and Saskia Copeland's at Digital Interruption up in Manchester, they're hot on this. They're building tooling and building a company that is super diverse, mostly women, run by a black guy, run by a woman, and really nailing it in terms of diversifying the knowledge and learning of security and sharing it within the community, broader tech community as well, and not keeping it inside. They're quite open, but at the same time, security people are naturally cautious because some of what they do can be construed as being illegal. If you're doing it legitimately for a business, then you're protected by that as long as you follow the rules. But if you're doing it on your own time against a public website or a public application or a particular company, then there's legal risk around that.
Yeah.
So being parts of bug bounties and things like that can be very lucrative. But learning those skills can get you into legal trouble. So it's no wonder that the security community has been quite insulated and isolated. And I think the more we democratize it and the more we make it a little bit more diverse each day through increments, then the easier it is it's going to be to talk about it. That's why I love listening to different kinds of podcasts about it. So you've got the really hardcore security people that you hear on .NET Diaries, but then you've got the sort of more humorous and business focused stuff that you get on other podcasts, like Smashing Security, for example, by Graham Cluley and Carol Theriault. So that's more like looking at news items and what's happening in the news and understanding where the security problems could be and how we talk about them, and making it a fun thing rather than it being a dark, nasty, area of the back alley of the technology industry that you don't want to get into. It is exciting, it is fun, but at the same time, you need to have the mindset, if you're a tester, of just focusing on the thing you want to focusing on, getting that done, keeping to your charter, and then create, so that you don't fall down the, some dark alleyway of bad behavior, for example, which could happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to democratize learning about security and share it with people.
Yeah, that's great.
I want it to be diverse. I want it to be fun. I want it to be interesting and exciting. I don't want it to be this sort of dark, fetid, horrible cesspit of nastiness that it can be perceived as being. Because security work's important. We have a responsibility to protect customer and personal data, whether you agree with sort of political reasons why that might be the case. But when someone signs up to a service or an application or a product, they have just as much right to feel that their data is being kept securely and looked after. We have a legal responsibility and we have a moral responsibility to do that. And if we're falling short of that, that for me is a problem. And I think this is where testers can really get involved, because we are kind of, maybe I'm blowing our own trumpet a little bit, but we're kind of the glue that sits between a lot of technical teams.
Yeah.
We have to have a high level view of what's going on, because we're not just worried about the functions we're building. We're also worrying about how it looks, how it feels, how you can use it, how it performs, not just whether it's functionally complete or not. And security is part of that. And so making that knowledge a little bit more accessible, which is why I like the work that Digital Interruption is doing, and all the the demystifying it and making it, it's not all like the Matrix and Bourne movies or or whatever it might be. It's taking those technical skills that we have and using them for the benefit of everyone. And people build and do technology for all sorts of horrible reasons, but at the same time, we have the skills as testers to share it and make it accessible and make it easy to learn, and also make it a pleasure to do. And I think that's where a technique or an approach like exploratory testing can be very, very helpful, because it keeps it pleasurable. It keeps it focused on the work that you're doing and not down the rabbit hole, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to frame, particularly in the context of security and that dark side of security, which may be down to parts of the community and also just some like holding on to knowledge and not that willingness to share with others. And exploratory testing, as you share, is a great way to not allow yourself to go down that rabbit hole, or at least explore parts of it and have awareness of it that works for you as an individual and where you are in your career. I can absolutely see through what you described during our chat today how it can help.
There's a whole heap of things you can do in your own spare time to gen up on the skills that you need. Reading is like, and experimenting is one. Trying it out on a deliberately vulnerable application like the Juice Shop or something like that is another. So that you can take that learning, practice it in your own time, or run workshops internally in your business.
Yeah.
Say, I'm doing one in April for internal conference, doing a bug bounty, well, not a bug hunt on a vulnerable app, so that people can learn these security skills.
Excellent.
And and I'll take with me all the things that I've learned. I mean, I've got this book, Grey Hat Python. I've not dealt deep dive into it. I'm not great at Python, but if you need to want to do security testing, learning Python is one of the best ways to do it. It's one of the most widely used scripting tools for security. I've got, if you haven't got one, see if you can get a red team and a blue team in your organizations. So this is the blue team field manual. This is the red team field manual. And blue teams are the defenders and red teams are the attackers. And you can do that internally. So this is full of scripts and tools and things like that. And then there's 2 editions of the Hacker Playbook. So a practical guide to penetration testing. So these are all quite shiny. I've not read them all. This one was recommended to me by Shay Crompton, called Hands on Hacking, because he's doing a lot of security work at the moment. Purple Teaming, which is like the blend of red and blue.
I got it. Nice.
Now, this is a new book, and I've not read it yet because it's quite new. So Tanya Janka, she's a Canadian lady, and she runs She Hacks Purple on Twitter, She Hacks Purple, and she does a really great security courses that you can go and learn and do. And there's a whole heap of stuff on Pluralsight and Wiley and all those kinds of things, which are great books and places to learn. But hers are really sort of fun to get into. And the last book I want to show you is this one. Another woman, Dr. Jessica Barker. She's a social engineering expert, and she's done this one called Confident Cybersecurity, which is about how to get started in cybersecurity and future-proof your career. So there's a lot of interesting books you can read, and lots of great courses you can do, and lots of great tooling that you can use, and lots of great learning opportunities that you can develop this stuff with. It doesn't have to go down the rabbit hole. You can use as much and learn as much as you need to do the job that you need to do. And a little knowledge can be quite useful and dangerous. So, it doesn't mean that you have to end up becoming this super cool hacker with like a handle like the movie. What was it? Crash Override and Acid Burn, wasn't it? Was that from the movie? I forget now. There are people that have those kinds of. That's generally a fiction, really.
Yeah,
we're just people that are trying to do a job in an organization and that's all I'm trying to do is just share the learning. So,
love it. That's great advice. Just to be able, if you are someone who's at their stage in their career where they have stuff to share, is just to go for it and do it in a way that you can inspire others. You can inspire the next generation. You can diversify who is learning about this stuff. And give them an opportunity, lift up those people who might, they might not have the confidence, or they might not have had certain things in their life that have allowed them to do this. And it's a role of those with the experience and the privilege to lift those people up and to spread this knowledge and not keep it like, because it's security, we can't talk about it. We should talk about it because it's important
Indeed.
stuff. And we should feel confident to talk about it in a way where we can be open and learn from each other. like any skill within testing, like how we can learn about exploratory testing as an approach to testing and as a load of techniques to testing. Encourage that conversation, and I'm certainly grateful for everything you do for the world of security testing and how much you're open to sharing your knowledge and experience, and I know a lot of people in the testing community across the globe are very grateful for that. So thank you, Dan. I really are really grateful for everything that you share. It's awesome.
Thank you. A bit tearful now.
Well, no, and it's, you always put the time aside for people. You always make that effort to share your experiences and things that have worked for you and things that haven't worked for you, and that openness to say to someone, and I've seen you do this a number of times, whether it's at a conference or on social media, to say, let's just jump on a chat. We can talk about this stuff, and I can share thoughts, or I can coach you and ask you some questions. There's not loads of people are open and willing and able to do that. So
I've less time than I used to do that kind of thing, but I still want to be able to do it. Actually, do I have less time? I've got more time because I've got a very focused 9-to-5 job now. I'm not contracting. But at the same time, at the end of a working day, I want to turn my monitors off and
for sure
sit and read a book or play a video game or watch Line of Duty, which I haven't watched yet. You were asking earlier about things that can get people into it and heuristics and things like that. And I think one of the best places you can start is the standards and the policies in your organization.
Yes. Yeah.
Look at those. Look at the standards and the policies in your organization. If you notice a gap between what you're doing in your organization from a security perspective and the standards and policies of that, pull that gap up and look at the risks between what your policy says and what you're doing, and try and see if you can plug that gap. Now, it might mean raising it to someone that's in seniority. If you have a CTO or a CISO, they're going to be the ones responsible for your security posture. And it's worth raising. Are we going to do a pen test on this? If we're going to do a pen test, is it going to be an internal one, or are we going to get external people to do it? And if we get external people coming in to do it, are we going to be able to sit with them, or are they going to be doing it remotely? Obviously, we're all remote at the moment, but are we going to get that feedback, that the information from them, or are they going to do it in isolation of us? There's an OWASP testing guide. I've mentioned the OWASP top 10. So OWASP is the open source web application security project. They have a application security verification standard, which you can use to then implement your own standards internally. And they also have a testing guide, which is really, really, really helpful. Now, you can just pick and choose the elements that are relevant to you, but it's a useful oracle for picking up which components of that standard and that guide are going to be helpful to implement in your organization. If you're in a financial organization, you're going to have standards already that apply, like ISO or SOC 2, PCI, a whole heap of other things, depending on where you are in the world. It's a huge challenge to meet, and I love those kinds of challenges. And you mentioned, I'm open to people coming to ask for help or talk to me. Come and speak to me, or find someone in your organization or elsewhere that is kind of your rubber duck. I don't have a rubber duck on my desk. I have my friend here who does all my desk-bound security.
Love it. Love it.
So, I talk to my Dalek and say, how shall I solve this problem, Dalek? And he would say, I'm trying to think of what a Dalek would say. Do not procrastinate, or something like that.
I love it.
Or whatever. He would give advice. I'm quite lazy. Sorry, my Dalek's pretty good. I've 40 years of watching Doctor Who has really developed my skills in Dalek voice. So there are have someone identify someone in your business that's interested in security. This is a thing. Develop security champions in your business. If you're a senior person in the organization, really get behind this, because this will really help you democratize that learning and understanding, not keeping it inside your engineering team or just your developers. If a tester wants to pair with a developer that's interested in security, identify that developer, try and find some common ground. Don't just start throwing bugs at them and saying, I found this security bug. Talk to them about what it is you found. Invite them to come and sit with you, or when you can, or screen share. I'm saying post-COVID, where we're all back in the office.
Of course.
Current situation, you can't do that, or not yet. Be sympathetic. Be empathetic. Have that level of human understanding that helps you. It's the same with any aspect of tech and testing. But more so with security, I think. And if you're a senior person in an organization, identify those people. Have at least one or two people in each of your engineering departments or teams, especially if you're a big organization, who can act as a security champion. If you're a small company or a startup, you've got to have at least one person who's responsible for that, whether it's the CTO, but they've got to lead from the front and saying, okay, so we've got an issue that's come in today and it's a security problem. What are we going to do? Are we going to hide it and pretend it doesn't exist? Or are we going to be open and talk about it? Companies that do responsible disclosure, and I mentioned digital interruption earlier, they had an incident around responsible disclosure a few months ago, which is worth exploring, and how you communicate that and how someone responds to that responsible disclosure as well. So you can have responsible disclosure internally as well as externally. It's all about attitude. It's all about values. It's all about having the time to just breathe in the problem and understand it rather than just ignore it. Because it will, if you leave it there, it will just get worse and worse and worse. Someone will spot it, an open port or a public API, or an API that's got public access when it shouldn't, or what have you, and that's it. It's game over.
I think that is a lovely piece of sound advice, probably to wrap up our chat. We've had a good old conversation, and Dan, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. You have so much good stuff to share and good advice, and really grateful for that. And there's plenty of places for people to go exploring off the back of this conversation. So thank you so much.
Not at all. It's my pleasure. If I had one sort of closing remark, it would be to just be open to the learning opportunities that security can give you. But remember that with great power comes great responsibility.
Well, thanks so much, Dan. And let's take a moment to catch up in person when we can. It'd be great to see you for real, and have a good old catch up. It's long overdue.
My new office will be in Enfield in North London, so I'll definitely be in London once we're able to travel.
Oh, that's
at
cool.
least 2 times a week. So but I'll be living in Bristol for the foreseeable future, but I'll be commuting to London every now and again. So definitely be up for that. I cannot wait to see another human being and some of the lovely people that I'm connected with in the testing community, who I miss dearly and value immensely. So thank you, Simon, for your lovely chat today.
Thank you, Dan, and take care and see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for watching. I'm grateful if you could like this video or subscribe to the channel, and do let me know if you're interested in TestBuddy. See you next time, and and keep exploring.